is 1% psilocybin, 1 gram of psilocybe cubensis dried is 10 milligrams, right? So basically 1 gram and higher is a macrodose. Microdoses are 1/10 to 1/20th of that. They're sub-intoxicating or non-perceptual. You cannot feel, you don't feel them sort of in a big way. I feel them in a little way. So it's a little bit on the margin of being perceptual. Color's a little brighter. I'm in a better mood. I'm better with my partner. I'm more congenial. I tend to make bad jokes more often. It's a mood elevator for me. So is that perceptual? Well, not really in the sense of intoxicating, but it certainly is pleasant and bouldering, So, okay, so we're looking at psilocybe cubensis mushrooms, and we had 3 categories here: a low dose, a medium dose, and a high dose. So, and you look at the 1/3, 1/10 to 1/3 of a gram of psilocybe cubensis, which is 1 to 3 milligrams, about 72 and 16%. So you're looking at about 86% of the respondents in this survey were in this microdose range. So we helped design an app for the iPhone and the Droid at Quantified Citizen. It's at microdose.me. I encourage all of you to join in this app. And we wanted to get a very big population of respondents. Again, look at those meta surveys. What if we broaden these surveys? We have lots and lots of people self-reporting. Could they report something we would not see in a smaller subset of 10 or 20 people? So we have over 22,000 people now that have signed up for this app and who are self-reporting. And the app is anonymous. It's gone through review of ethics. And then you can type in, what you're microdosing with, what you're adding to the microdose. In this case, is not only the amount, but also whether you're stacking it with niacin or lion's mane or chocolate or other material. So, and there's challenge tests, and these are all tests that psychiatrists use to measure cognitive function. So these are not just random tests, but these are all based in well-established psychiatric testing models. Well, we went ahead and we published in Nature Scientific Reports 2 papers. And the first paper was kind of a qualifying paper. What's your motivations? What are you doing, etc. The second paper is more looking at quote unquote cause and effect, or putatively cause and effect. And so this is where we started to see some really interesting data beyond just motivation. And we found in this report that what the motivation for them is primarily reducing anxiety and depression, increasing performance and cognition, other sorts of metrics like that. Well, we definitely did see an improvement in mood, a reduction of anxiety, a reduction in depression. So this is real data. People are reporting it. Now, when you encounter skeptics who try to dissuade this, if you're a psychiatrist, isn't your goal to make the patient feel better? So if they have a significant reduction in depression and anxiety, aren't you helping that patient? Sometimes scientists get lost in the weeds. And so, but some of these questions are academically interesting and are valid. So we started looking at something called the stack, and I popularized this. I had a flash of intuition in the around 2015. And I thought, well, if psilocybin is so close to serotonin, it substitutes the serotonin, the receptors, but psilocybin's a vasoconstrictor, niacin's a vasodilator. So I thought with vasodilation, and neuropathies oftentimes present themselves from vasoconstriction and deadening of the fingertips and the toes, that if you can have vasodilation to the endpoints of the peripheral nervous system, you could have more neurogenic benefits. Also, niacin, you take it, you start itching. It excites your nerve endings, right? It makes you red and itch, and you're super sensitive. So I thought, wow, that's like throughout the entire body. So that's one of the reasons. And then lion's mane mushrooms are really well documented and there's several, I think 4 clinical studies. You can go to mushroomreferences.com. We populate this specifically for researchers and physicians, so you can very quickly get to the medicinal properties of mushrooms. Not branded, just pure science. So some of the studies are presented here with lion's mane mushrooms. It's the mycelium that is by far more potent. It contains these compounds called erinacines. that stimulate not only nerve growth factors, but remyelination on the axons of nerves. And then another test, because my discussions with Dr. Pam was saying, yeah, people feel better, they have less anxiety, less depression, but I wanted to know, well, can they perform better? Is there a performance test? And she goes, well, yes, we have a psychomotor test. Physicians often use this. Those physicians here in the audience, you know this well, is how many times you can tap your fingers in 10 seconds. When you're 22, you can tap a lot more when you're 82. But if you have traumatic brain injury, you have interruption of psychomotor skills. When you have dementia, Alzheimer's, or age-related neuropathy, you decline in your tapping frequency. So you can become more, the question is there a coordination benefit? So we went, and this tapping test, which I'm not going to show the whole thing here, but just shows you basically how it activates. And then there's a single tap and there's a double tapping test. Over 100 papers published clinically on the validity of the finger tapping test as an indication of psychomotor benefit. So we got this massive data set, and we have so much data. We have, it's in hundreds of millions of data points now from 22,000 people taking these tests and all the different variables that are involved. But something astonishing happened. And the researchers called us up, said, we're not going to give you the data. But we saw something and we can't believe it. So they attacked the data 3 different ways. And this is what came out that was so surprising with the TAP test. Those people were doing the Stamets stack, a combination of psilocybin mushrooms, microdosing, lion's mane, and niacin. In 30 days, over the age of 55, increased their tapping ability from 48 taps to 68 taps in 30 days. There's no other way to explain this, folks. That is a psychomotor coordination benefit. Think of the potential significance of that. So this is not something that people feel, this is how people perform. How many people, elderly, fall in their kitchens or in the bathroom and break their hips, go to the hospital, get an infection and die? I mean, if we can reduce just falling, how many guitar players aren't able to teach their students when they're in their 70s, and there are maestros when they're in their 50s? Think about the ramifications of being able to improve psychomotor skills in age. So when we saw this data, we tasked our scientists, well, what could possibly explain what's happening here? We narrowed down into MAP kinases. These are proteins that are related to receptors. And if you could, when they stimulate nerve growth factors and BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factors, and when these are stimulated, it increases facilitation of them docking on the outer membranes of cells, actually goes to the nucleus, and then causes the nucleus within nerves to divide. So these MAP kinases are really well studied. They're called, the ones we focused on, track A, B, and C. So we sent the individual components of the Stamets stack, and we got some activity with psilocybin and psilocin, the expected cumulative addition, as you see here, red and blue. But when we put them together, we had synergy. In this case, 4x and 6 times more at the microdosing levels, not at macrodosing. So we went, wow, that was interesting. So we started sending in more and more and more samples. Over 1,000 samples that we have sent in. This cost an enormous amount of money to do these tests. And these tests are for preclinical drug discovery. So then we did try it again, then within track A, all 3 of them, lion's mane, containing erinacines, psilocin, and niacin. And we have something really interesting here. At this dosage range, there was no activity of the individual components, but when they were put together, they had synergy. This is related to what's called the gunpowder analogy, where you have 3 components, charcoal, sulfur, potassium nitrate. That's actually a gating 1A exit on the patent office for natural products. If you can have 3 components that do not have activity when combined are explosive, like in gunpowder, if someone invented gunpowder today and we didn't have it before, that would be a patentable natural product combination, because they do not co-occur in nature, and the human hand of intervention puts them together with something that was unprecedented. So this is called maximum calculable value, when each of the components do not have activity, but synergistically put together they do. We're most fascinated with track Bs. Now this is an extraordinary article, 28 co-authors published in Cell, identifying that the antidepressive effects of the antidepressant medicines, the minor and major medicines, are related to TrkBs. And here we also have synergy, maximum calculable value of the components in the stack, which together causes synergy and neurogenesis, neurogeneration. Now, I have over 100 of these. So it's not a 1-2 event, 1-2-3 event. It's an entourage event. You're taking psilocybin and then the analogs. These are baocystin, norbaocystin, norpsilocin, originacin. These are non-psychedelic tryptamines associated with psilocybin and psilocin production, and they also have this synergistic effect. So across the neurological ecosystem and neuroscape, you're eliciting all these excitements of binding affinities and stimulating nerve growth factors and BDNF. So this entourage effect of these components of the natural product, and this is why I think the natural product is better than the single molecule. And 99% approximately of all the clinical studies, maybe it's 96% now, use psilocybin the molecule. But 99, and I'm not exaggerating, 99.99999% of users in the world are using psilocybin the mushroom. So we need to bridge this divide between scientific clinical studies with using psilocybin versus the natural product. So then we start looking at anti-inflammatory cytokines. And this elicits what's called interleukin-10s. These are anti-inflammatories and anti-neuroinflammatories. Also, they induce endogenous antiviral defenses. So this is really interesting. They have something that stimulates nerve cell regeneration. Oftentimes that's associated with an inflammation. For those of you who are not experiencing this, when you have cell division, it's just natural. To have something that downregulates inflammation but promotes neurogeneration, that is very, very cool. So my bottom line hypothesis is that niacin is a catalyst for psilocybin. If you remember that slide where I showed 120 clinical trials, in the very bottom, it said 11 clinical trials used niacin as an active placebo. The reason being, in 20 minutes with psilocybin, you have liftoff, in 20 minutes with niacin, you start itching. But I've talked to several of the clinicians, and they have to keep their mouth shut, but the patients go, "Oh, I'm really hot and I itch," you know, and they got there, well, obviously they got the niacin, but we're not going to say anything. So, again, experienced psychonauts immediately know that they got the placebo. So, because there is 11 clinical studies teaching away from my concept, using niacin opposite psilocybin, I think they missed the mark. I think niacin is a catalyst, and niacin's biodilation property counteracts psilocybin's vasoconstriction, and then the entourage effect that I just described also has that. So we're looking at what is delivery systems that people commonly use. This is by far the most popular, is making your own chocolates. Mm-hmm. And you can have a chocolate party, Of course, do this only where it's legal. So I want to make sure that I'm compliant here. I'm not advocating anyone break the law. Please follow the law. The question and challenge you have is, do you follow state law or federal law? I'll leave that up to you. I don't have an opinion. I'm just a researcher. But I do know from case reports, quote unquote, that when you make this chocolate, you should be very, very careful. So children don't get into it. Somebody visiting doesn't find it and go, "I'm hungry," and eats 5 of these. And then the person like going, "Oh, I need some help." So the most clever label I've seen put on these chocolates is laxative. That usually discourages anyone from eating them. And keeping them out of the reach of children, of course, is really, really important. That's a little bit controversial. Psilocybin may be a very, very good treatment, hopefully and potentially for autism, etc. And that being said, everything that I've said to you today has to be proved clinically. These are hypotheses. We have some really good data. We have supporting data. The TAP test is hard to argue against. Because with the TAP test, think about this. With the hundreds of people involved in the TAP test, they're getting psilocybin from various sources illegally, variability in potency, variability in niacin, variability in lion's mane. And yet the p-value of significance is 0.004. That's 1 chance in 250 that it's just random. So with those confounders, if you had it more confined, specifically to doses, logically, you would have a better outcome than having it washed with this variability. So we may be understating the potential here. We don't know until we prove this clinically. This is why we are marching towards clinical trials as soon as we can. We hope to have clinical trials comparing the stack versus psilocybin alone versus I think it should be open label. It shouldn't just be a placebo, right? With microdosing, you can do a placebo. With macrodosing, you can't. So maybe, we have to have some creative thinking, and clinicians far smarter than me are involved in this. So what does this potentially mean? If this proves to be true, and again, I'm emphasizing, we don't know, we have to prove this clinically, but the preclinical evidence and the observational data that we have, the prospective observational data we have, pretty compelling, pretty exciting. So if so, both the peripheral and central and autonomic nervous system could benefit. This could be potentially a game changer. Think of the body intellect in this room, especially of us elders, who have had encyclopedic knowledge only to lose it due to dementia or Alzheimer's or other diseases. That loss of knowledge, culturally speaking, is economically and culturally devastating. To be able to preserve that knowledge to hand it to the next generation is a sacred, sacred duty and an obligation. So I have a group of great scientists that have been involved in helping me in this research, and here's 11 of them. We've published now 77 articles in peer-reviewed journals, not on all psilocybin, of course, just a few on psilocybin. But Albert Einstein, I think, in his wisdom, especially as he got older and began to write more philosophically, said a leap in consciousness does not come from logical linear deduction. It's something that happens spontaneously. It's like synaptogenesis, and you have this eureka moment. And the scientists who connect with their spiritual nature, I am not religious, but I'm spiritual. Who could not be spiritual looking at astronomy, looking in the stars? I had a recent experience, and most of my psilocybin experiences are talking about, save the planet, we're all one together, your ancestors are speaking to you, your descendants are calling back in time, speaking to you. I get those messages, I get those marching orders, I get them every time. One of my other experiences more recently, I came out of the experience with one word, and I told my partner, I got one word. I got this one word of wisdom. And I was saying, I get chills right now just talking about it, because I'm remembering the experience. And she goes, well, what is it? What is it? And the one word in all big capital letters was existence. We all exist. We have always existed. We will forever exist. My atoms will be separated from my molecules and disambiguate and reform. Our atoms together are flowing throughout the universe, throughout the microverse. So in summary, I believe psilocybin makes nicer people. I believe psilocybin reduces violence. I believe psilocybin can break the shackles of addiction. I believe psilocybin reduces crime. When you meet someone who's been traumatized, it's just not them. It's their partner, their family, their neighbors, their community. People know he's an addict, he went to prison, she went to prison, they were violent, they were disruptors in a negative way. So it emanates out through society. It causes a shared trauma in the community. But psilocybin is different. When you meet somebody who's an addict, somebody who's been violent. In fact, I just met numerous SEALs, and my respect to these warriors who've suffered incredible experiences, in war. Here in Austin, there's a large group, and the SEALs are flocking to psilocybin. There's over 600, I've been told, in a community, going through churches, so it's legal. Law enforcement officers also being traumatized. They're being involved. A law enforcement officer I met in Vancouver, he said They're not arresting people with psilocybin. Law enforcement officers know that psilocybin reduces crime. I said, well, and he goes, how? I don't understand. How does that change you? He goes, you know, we used to go up to people we have to arrest really aggressive and mean and, you know, intimidating. And, you know, people are scared, right? And they're frightened, they react. I go, well, what's changed now? He goes, after psilocybin, we walk up to them with a big smile on our face. We go, how you doing today? And the person's nervous, they're law enforcement. And, oh, okay. And he goes, I got good news and I got bad news. What do you want first? He says, amazing. Everyone wants the good news first, right? Well, you can finish your cup of coffee. I go, what's the bad news? He goes, I got to arrest you. And he said, it's amazing. They arrest these people, whereas before they're aggressive and adversarial and antagonistic. They're having the greatest conversations in the squad car. They're happy, they're cooperative. They're sharing stories about their children, what they like to do, you know, after work. And he goes, and the law enforcement officers are no longer traumatized. They're no longer on edge and trigger happy because they feel they're going to be attacked. They're relating to the people as with respect and dignity. This is what psilocybin does. Now we wax poetic, and I have very high expectations, and of course this needs to be proven clinically. But I believe psilocybin is a game changer. And we're at a critical moment in the evolution of our species to have a paradigm shift in consciousness, that we can bring unanimity of all people around the world. This is the message of psilocybin, is we are all one. We are all one community, not only of people, but of all organisms, not only of organisms, but with all matter in the universe. Psilocybin is a gateway into universal consciousness. I think this is our time. This is our time to lead the charge with great science. We want skeptics. My best supporters have been my skeptics. We want to be able to reach across the political aisle. The veterans and the SEALs are bringing Republicans and Democrats together because they know that psilocybin works. Law enforcement knows that it works. The radical improvement in people who are suffering such negative consequences and re-emanating those. And the advantage of psilocybin, like a pebble going into a pond, emanates in waves, go out of positiveness, healing, kindness, and goodness. And now the person that's been cured or is better is no longer angry, no longer an addict. They fundamentally changed. It's not only them, it's their partner, it's their family, it's their community, it's their country, it's the world. This is our time. Psilocybin is coming to us literally from the mycelial networks underneath our feet. Nature is calling up to us. It is time for us to take psilocybin and to move it forward through science and the medical community. Move it with good guardrails. But if someone goes astray, reaching out your arm and kindness and bringing them back. Never criticize somebody in public. Constructive advice in private. Always praise them for the best that you see in them. That'll elevate everyone. I believe that psilocybin is the molecule that can create the paradigm in consciousness and help save the world. Thank you very much.